That is the latest from the counties. Of course, do expect more in our subsequent bulletins as the 1.4 KCP students and 1.2 KPCA students continue with their examinations. Also, what we're following up this particular afternoon is also the visit by the monarch led by King Charles III as well as his Queen Camilla. And of course, we want to get the latest from our very own Kipnusu, who I do understand is at State House Nairobi to also give us up to speed. I do understand we'll get a hold of our reporter, that is Timothy Kipnusu, to give us where the Queen and the King have reached. We also saw the President earlier. But we do have a special story that covered from the Mount Kenya region of this particular great country. You do know what happened between 1901 until 1963 when we got our independence. Our very own O'Brien visited the region to get the latest and how people feel when King Charles III and Queen Camilla are making to Kenya.
On a cold, chilly morning on 31st of January 1952, a sickly King George VI was at the Heathrow airport to see his daughter Princess Elizabeth and her husband Prince Philip as they boarded a British Overseas Airways en route to Kenya. Little did they know that they were bidding goodbye to each other for the last time. Aged only 25 and completely inexperienced, the princess and her husband were en route to Kenya, New Zealand and Australia as part of a Commonwealth tour. However, this was never to be. After arriving in Nairobi, the princess was whisked by British forces who had been assigned to guard her entourage at a time when Mau Mau freedom fighters were raiding for a face-off with the British forces over land and labor exploitation.
I had a personal encounter, so I had the privilege of asking her how it was when she visited Kenya in 1952, and from her own mouth she told me she rode by train up to Ndarugu, and from there was by car to Nyeri and then to the treetops, and spent the night at the Sagana State Lodge. It brought back memories, because when I visited her at Thika Sports Club as chair, after her lunch date with us, she actually wrote 5 letters thanking the chair of Thika Sports Club for having hosted her at the club. Except for the date and the letterheads that were used, the wording was the same. When she went to Sagana State Lodge, she wrote a letter to Thika Sports Club saying, "I wish to thank you most sincerely for the wonderful hospitality that you gave me when I visited Thika Sports Club." Signed, Elizabeth II.
According to Dr. Nyamo Njoka, who is a cultural historian and a member of the Kikuyu Council of Elders, the princess boarded a train to Thika, where she was to inspect various British manufacturing interests before heading to Fort Hall, present-day Murang'a. However, the trip was deemed too dangerous, forcing the princess to change plans, opting to travel by road to Nyeri.
One thing I am sure is that she wasn't given the whole picture of what was happening in this country. Remember, Sir Evelyn Bering was brought from Malaysia to come and quell the uprising of the Agikuyu in Kenya. The late Sir Derek Erskine was brought from Palestine to come and quell the uprising of the Agikuyu against the colonial government. And when this is what I have read, and when the two gentlemen met, they said, dealing with the Agikuyu, we only need 3 months, and we'll finish with them and go back to our stations. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to be that easy, because in 1956, Sir Oliver Littleton raised his hands in the British Parliament and confessed that the British war against the Agikuyu of Kenya, the Brits were not going to win. And that is when the Littleton Constitution was passed, giving the right to Africans to elect members to the Legislative Council.
The princes arrived at the treetops on the 2nd of February 1952, according to official records at the hotel. The British monarchy spent the day watching and counting wildlife at the treetops, where, according to records, 40 elephants were counted, mid waterbucks and 50 rhinos. On the 3rd of February 1952, Princess Elizabeth attended a Sunday service at the St. Philip's Anglican Church in Narumoru that lasted about 2 hours and 30 minutes.
They go to the coronation procession. I was 15 at the time, and with my dad and mum and my brother, we decided to go. We sort of spent a night sleeping on the streets of Nairobi, waiting for the next day for the procession. We obviously didn't go to the service in the Abbey, but we were among the crowds who were waiting and watching the procession, which was, for a 15-year-old kid, quite exciting.
Jim Barney, who is a member of the St. Philip's Church, says most of the items used during the service are still intact and kept in a safe location.
Well, I would expect him to refer back to the time his mother was here. I would expect him possibly to refer to the fact that over the years the British Army have been training here together with the Kenyan Army, so there's close ties there. And I'd hope he would want to strengthen those ties.
The church, which was opened in 1949, has maintained its Victorian design with its mahogany doors. Inside the church, an old piano and the large Bible that was read during the service are still intact, together with the pulpit. After the service, the royals retreated for lunch at the Narumoru River Lodge, which is less than 5 kilometers away. The hotel is still operational and welcoming guests. While the Narumoru River still flows, the famous trout fish, which was in abundance, is no more due to overfishing and pollution upstream. In the evening, the royals retreated to the treetops for a rest after a busy and a hectic day. Meanwhile, the Mau Mau fighters' call for freedom and land redistribution was growing and gaining popularity in central Kenya. Inside the 10 Downing Street in London, UK Prime Minister then Sir Winston Churchill was drawing up a plan on how to quell and suppress the Mau Mau uprising. On the 4th of February, the royals embarked on a tour of the expansive Aberdeen National Park, visiting various points in the park, among them the fishing lounge, which was famous for trout fishing, and a vantage point for game viewing. Then, the UK royal family had a picnic lunch next to the Queen's Caves, which were also used by Mau Mau freedom fighters to organize and launch surprise attacks on British forces and members of the settler community, according to Geoffrey Kariuki, Customer Relations Officer at the Aberdeen National Park.
These caves were discovered by the Mau Mau. This is where they used to hide through the caves, so that they could not easily be spotted by the British forces. So this is where they used to hide. And during the time when the Queen was coming in, this is one of the places that they had the intention to bring her on her way to Treetops Lodge in 1952.
Princess Elizabeth and her entourage decided to come over here to have a look at the famous Magura Caves that were used by the Mau Mau fighters as a hideout. And exactly this location is where she was served her picnic lunch. And according to historians, part of what was on the menu was smoked fish and mashed potatoes. And thereafter, she went down to have a look at the Magura Caves. And as she was coming up, these caves had already been renamed as the Queen Caves. Today, they're still as intact as they were back in 1952.
History tells us they were here for around 1.5 hours at most before they proceeded to the treetops, because by that time she was tiring and she was on her way to get to the hotel, because we are still around 46 kilometers away to where the treetops is.
The princes and Prince Philip retreated to their room, eating at the treetops for dinner. On the 5th day, The princess spent the day meeting various dignitaries and getting briefs from senior colonial government officials. She also took time to visit the Sagana Fishing Lodge, now Sagana State Lodge, which had been donated to her by the colonial government as a wedding gift.
For the last 3 years, the Treetops has remained closed. And this is a hotel where Princess Elizabeth went to bed as a princess and woke up as a queen. This hotel carries so much history, not only for this country, but also for the British monarchy. And so the question is, for how long will this facility remain closed to the public?
Meanwhile, at the Sandringham royal residence, the health situation of King George was getting worse, causing concern among his handlers. On the night of 5th February 1952, King George VI breathed his last at his Sandringham residence in Norfolk. British Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill was briefed and oversaw the operation codenamed Hyde Park Corner, meant to handle the news of his death. Meanwhile, in Nairobi at the Government House, now State House, a telegram was sent breaking the news of the death of the king. However, the telegram could not be decoded because the keys to the safe holding the code book were unavailable. On 6th of February 1952, report reached the Prince's Secretary Martin Chatteris about the king's death. A shocked Chatteris called Sagana State Lodge, where the monarch had gone to visit. He briefed Prince Philip about the king's death. However, the princess was not briefed about the death up until 2:45 p.m. when the prince gathered the courage to inform his wife about the unfortunate death of King George.
The Outspan Hotel holds a special place in the British monarchy. It is here where Prince's Secretary Martin Chatteris was lodging back on the 6th of February 1952. He received a telegram informing him about the death of King George. And this is where he contacted Prince Philip, who was staying at the Sagana Fishing Lodge with his wife, Princess Elizabeth, to inform him about the death of King George.
It is said that more communication came from London informing the Queen in waiting that she needed to return to England to prepare for the father's burial and the coronation ceremony. Elizabeth and her entourage drove to the Nanyuki airstrip, where she flew aboard an East African Airways Dakota to Entebbe, Uganda. After a 2-hour delay due to bad weather, the royals boarded another flight to Heathrow Airport in London. After the burial and coronation of the Queen, a state of emergency was declared in Kenya after Mau Mau freedom fighters increased their attacks on British installations and colonial officers. This led to mass incarceration of thousands of Kikuyus in Nyeri, Bu, Murang'a and Nyandarua districts.
Twaigatirwo kuo 1952 tukiumirio ni thirikari ya muthungu tugicokio kuu reserve kuria twathire kurio ni thina muingi muno tondu kuu ni kuo ndoneire ndutu ngirika ni ndutu muno na ng'aragu nyingi muno maitwaga githiaga kurimia ndia irio nigetha tuone irio ore agicoka akinyitwa akioho mieri 6 ni thirikari iyo ya muthungu ni undu wa guthi guturimiria irio ndia atari na pasi ya chibu.
Jogu Gethenji was only 8 years when his family was ripped apart by the colonial army. He remembers that day with a lot of pain and regrets. The British army conducted major operations that resulted into the deaths of thousands of Kenyans.
Igimwira ere Kenya sore handu ha Ngeretha tondu akiri kingi ere Kenya sore tondu na gituri haki haria watihirio hatingicoka kiria watunyirwo gitingicoka narikia kuga sore arihe andu aria mateire indo ciao bururi tondu mari maturaga mandikagwo marito maturaga mathiaga kwiyandikithia marito ma abici.
Gethenji says for King Charles' trip to Kenya to count, the UK government needs to apologize to Kenyans for the heinous act committed by the colonial government when his mother Queen Elizabeth II ruled the monarchy. Today, as King Charles visits Kenya, many are waiting to see what legacy his trip to Kenya will leave, or will it just be another royal tour to a former colony by British monarchy?
The fact that King Charles has picked Kenya as his first overseas trip to a Commonwealth country is a sign of the deep relations that exist between Kenya and the United Kingdom. For Channel One, I'm O'Brien Kimani.